Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pillar V2 webinar, where we'll be discussing will DeFi cross the chasm. My name is Aldin Adamovich, and I am your host. I'm the Pillar's CCO here, and I'm really excited to have you guys on board. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a very exciting panel coming up and a lot of good discussion points. So let me take you through the agenda for today. First, we will give you a quick overview about the Pillar ecosystem and who we are, if you are not familiar with us. Then I'm going to ask Michael, who is our co-founder and CEO, to define the crossing of the chasm. What does it actually mean? Where does it come from? After which we will do a short introduction about Pillar V2 and what our proposal is on how do we advance the chasm crossing. We will finish off with a nice panel discussion with a Q&A. So feel free to drop Q&A questions for any of our participants. This is a very fluid conversation. We really encourage you to do that. So let's get to it. The Pillar ecosystem, who are we? We are a project that raised about 20 million in 2017. In 60 hours. We're one of the most decentralized projects with about 9,000 participants in the ICO. We're not backed by any VC or big corporations, and our core offering is a smart contract-based wallet and an SDK developed for developers who can leverage our technology that we are using for Pillar V2 as well. We're governed by the Pillar DAO through the Pillar token, which is available on Uniswap, PancakeSwap, and of course, QuickSwap on Polygon. We are about 30 people, completely decentralized, and I really want to give a shout out to our team who have been working very, very hard to release this Pillar V2. I'm super proud of them. So really big thank you for the team, and I'm really encouraged about what we have done and what we're going to do next. So on the next subject matter is, I'm going to introduce Michael Masele, who is our co-founder and CEO, who will talk about crossing the chasm and what does it actually mean. So Michael, please join the stage.
Thank you, Aldin. Thank you for the great intro. When we talk about the chasm is part of the technology adoption lifecycle model that was created around the 1990s. What it does is it uses a statistical bell curve and categorizes the target market for a specific breakthrough, disruptive innovation, and how best to adapt it. So on the very left, which is innovators, these are the technologists that create the technology, the innovation, the breakthrough innovation. They make up about 2.5% of the overall target market, and they are closely aligned with the early adopters or visionaries. These early adopters or visionaries look at this technology and they say, oh, wow, I can use this technology and create such and such things and solve a real life use case problem. They get excited, they get their hands dirty, and they engage with these guys. And they form around 13.5% of the overall population of the target market. And now, right after them, you have the early majority. Now that is 34% of the target market. These guys love technology, but they have seen far too many fads come and go. So they're not just about to jump on the bandwagon just because it is there. They're a little bit cautious and they are pragmatist in their approach. So they want to see it work before they adapt it. Again, on the peak, the late majority, this 34%, and these two sectors are where the real transaction happens, the sales happens. Now, this late majority, they're not fussed too much about technology, but if it becomes mainstream, they'll use it. They have no qualms about it. And on the right-hand side, 16% of the population, they're called the laggards or skeptics. They don't want to touch it. They don't want to know it. However, if this new technology is embedded in an existing product that they use, then they'll use it. So when we talk about the chasm, the big chasm, we're talking about the behavioral difference between the early adopters and the early majority. Because the early adopters, as I've said earlier on, they get their hands dirty. The early majority have no time to waste. It has to work, or the behavioral change we expect from them has to be intuitive enough. If you when iPhone came about, it did require a change in user behavior because phones before had miniature keyboards embedded in them. However, the iPhone changed the game and you have to flick and touch. But the change in the user behavior expected was intuitive enough. It wasn't so drastic, it was adapted. On the other side, Google Glass was all the rage a few years ago. And some framed the usefulness of it by saying, oh, you can walk down the street and see an advertising or a billboard, and you can see the stats, you can display the stats and get all the info about it. In fact, if you are a football manager and the opposition player gets a penalty, you can actually get the stats downloaded on that specific player to tell your goalkeeper which way to go. But the protagonist said, hang on a minute, you're not just going to analyze me because you're wearing a glass and without even asking me for my privacy. And some others said, well, usability-wise, the glass doesn't even fold. The handles don't even fold. So what it meant ultimately was the Google Glass burnt in the chasm. It didn't cross the chasm. So when we talk about crossing the chasm for DeFi, it is within this respect. It's not just one company that does it. It is an ecosystem play. All the participants in the ecosystem providing complementary services so that the ask that we make to the users, to the early majority to adapt us, it wouldn't be too big enough for us to stay in the chasm too long or burn in there. One key point is any innovation that stays in the chasm for a longer period runs the risk of not coming out. And this takes us nicely into the Pillar V2 launch. The Pillar V2 makes transactions faster, cheaper. Why? It's because it is rolling out and implementing collaborations with the various EVM compatible chains like Polygon right out of the box. And not just that, you get your favorite DeFi marketplace like AAVE available to you both on the Ethereum mainnet and the sidechain. And you get, again, your favorite price aggregation and order routing like 1inch right out of the box, both on the mainnet and sidenet. So this is what I was alluding to when I talked about a collaboration, an ecosystem collaboration to create a whole product for the user base. This is an example. Ecosystem players, a marketplace, a price aggregation provider, a wallet, a blockchain technology provider, and a whole lot more cooperating together in creating a useful product so that we would be able to cross the chasm. And the Pillar V2 has actually been enabled with our innovation infrastructural innovation Etherspot, which has allowed us to create very many things to integrate into the wallet, and that very cool things such as you can send multiple transactions in one go. We can actually have Ethereum scaling feature available to you as a service. And you can send assets over multiple side chains and even Ethereum chains seamlessly. This will be very, very engaging with the developer community in the coming few months. And very engaging. I've said a lot, and maybe it's enough for me to say these things. And why not just play a nice video, a short video, and I'll end my piece there. Thank you.
Wow, Michael, thank you for that introduction into crossing the chasm and what it actually means, and that video, quite provocative. Let's introduce our panelists of today. I'm really excited about this part. Let's go through them. Anton from OneInch. If you guys haven't heard about Anton, Anton is the co-founder from OneInch. Is a distributed network of decentralized protocols. Over the past year, they've accounted more than 75% of all the DEX aggregated market and consistently facilitated 7 times more volume than its closest competitor. Since inception, OneInch has facilitated over 13 billion in trades, half of which were executed in the past 3 months alone. And next to him is Mark Zeller. Mark is the integration lead at AAVE, who is also active in the Ethereum community and one of the creators of Ethereum France, which is the upcoming event, EVE CC in Paris. He's the integration lead and he works to make life easier for projects building on AAVE. AAVE has about 17.5 billion in assets locked, and which of are 4.6, I think, billion on Polygon. Next to him is Polygon from Polygon, Arjun Kalsi, VP Growth. Arjun's journey started in 2017. He then has been involved in several blockchain projects. He's currently the heads the ecosystem growth at Polygon. Polygon has 7 billion in total lock value, and as of last week, they also have about 500 dApps that are on Polygon. So let's start the discussion. Welcome everybody, really excited about this. I'm gonna throw a quick question to everyone and then we'll go into the Q&A. So let's start with Mark. Mark, centralized exchanges still dominate the market in user acquisition and trading volume. And as one of the principal marketplaces in DeFi, how do you position yourself against traditional finance such as stock markets and also particularly centralized crypto exchanges?
The whole thing is a spectrum. You have like traditional finance on one side and pure DeFi on the other side, and a wide range of things in between. And I don't see any kind of opposition between these actors because you have different actors up there with different kind of users and suiting different kinds of needs. And I really believe that it's all about synergies and the fact that DeFi can work together with like centralized exchange. Like for example, yesterday, the Binance exchange, which is the largest exchange, crypto exchange in the world in terms of volumes and users, they integrated deposits directly from the Polygon blockchain directly to their exchange. That lead to easier adoption and usage of, for example, the AAVE protocol directly on the Polygon blockchain, because you don't have to jump through hoops. When you are a Binance user, you can directly go to Polygon with your Matic assets, or the other way around. If you have some Matic asset on Polygon, you can go directly to Binance. Before that, you had to take some cross-chain bridge, you will have to withdraw to Ethereum, then go back to Polygon, all this kind of crazy technical stuff that were very complex for the end users. And we are seeing more and more synergy happening on that side. And also what DeFi doesn't do, because I cannot, if I have like a $20 bills in my hands, I cannot put that in my computer and that means it's on the blockchain. You will always need some kind of traditional finance or centralized finance to act as an on-ramp and off-ramp into the decentralized world. So there's always going to be bridges between those kind of actors. Obviously, we are developing and working on the decentralized side of things, but I don't see any opposition there.
Interesting. So you are thinking that centralized exchanges will always have a pathway to it. I always thought that, you know, fiat on ramps will always be existent, but DeFi will take more and more space from centralized exchanges, particularly regarding trading. And I think, you know, Anton from OneInch, you know, your protocol in particular is very much tailored towards trading. You just recently released a limit order liquidity protocol. What's your thinking on this process? Like, are we going to move the power away from the traders, from centralized exchanges to something more decentral?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting question. I personally think that centralized exchanges are here for many, many years, and maybe they will not disappear at all. And right now we see synergy of existing DeFi services and centralized exchanges, even if most people not heard about this synergy. For example, there are like more than 60 services in Ethereum mainnet aggregated into 1 inch, and more than 20 different protocols on Polygon also integrated in 1 inch. And few of them, or we call them private market makers. This is teams who can provide signed orders to exchange with users by RFQ system. When someone is going to make a trade, we request quote from these private market makers, and if they would provide or signed order with a great price, we will use it for trade of this user. And what they actually do, they hedge their trades on other markets like centralized exchanges, on layer 2 dexes, which are like which executes their trades in separate environment, not on chain. And actually, centralized exchanges, they helps dexes and like on-chain traders to have better prices. This happens over these private market makers. So if centralized exchanges would not exist at this point, it will be much harder to provide such competitive prices. And also, prices changes very fast on centralized exchanges. And what we see, this produce a lot of arbitrage volume on decentralized environment. So a huge amount of orders and trades happens on chain after price moved on centralized exchanges.
Interesting. So do you, and this is more of a question for Arjun as well, like are we ever going to get to a space, particularly talking about scaling, are we ever going to get to the space that scaling will be so sufficient that we will be on par with centralized exchanges and the trading and how the price action moves between them? So will that evolve, or do we think it's never going to evolve into that point of like a centralized exchange as well?
So I definitely feel that it will take obviously quite some time for any sort of decentralized kind of exchange to reach that level of performance. But I think the interesting way to analyze like what you just talked about also is let's look at the kind of problems which a centralized exchange can solve very effectively and what a decentralized exchange solves very effectively. So if you look at a centralized exchange, like you can trade assets across several different blockchains. Right, so there are many blockchains out there. Each blockchain has like a large amount of liquidity, and by creating pairs, you can basically trade across several different tokens across several different blockchains. If you had to do the same thing in a decentralized exchange, you would need lots of liquidity. You would need lots of different bridges. You would probably need to have a combination of dexes across all those bridges to manage all those liquidities. All these chains have different levels of performance. Decentralization, doing all of that could be pretty complex. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, centralized exchanges solve a very unique problem, which is they provide a very large breadth of the kind of assets which you can trade, right? Which decentralized exchanges are not there yet. At the same time, like what Anton and even Mark talked about, that it's essentially how what I think is interesting is when we see both centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges sort of feeding off each other and sort of working together to provide interesting and more different kinds of arbitrage opportunities for users, thereby increasing sort of the DeFi pie, as one might say, right? So you have users who can now, because major exchanges have like integrations with networks like scaling solutions like Polygon, that users can exit and enter centralized exchanges very quickly, right, and at very low costs, and thereby set up interesting kind of opportunities for DeFi. So I think if you look at how the future will unfold, I think it's going to be a lot of interesting combination of things where decentralized exchanges and centralized exchanges will work together. Of course, like I said, centralized exchanges solve a very unique problem by providing a breadth of different kinds of assets which you can trade, which in decentralized exchanges is a problem because you need sufficient liquidity across a large number of assets for sort of the trading to make a lot of sense with less impermanent loss and things like that. Also, it's interesting when you look at decentralized exchanges where in centralized exchanges you have professional market makers, right, who are people who have lots of liquidity who sort of manage the trades. In decentralized exchanges, average people just like you and me can become, you could say, the market maker. So if I go and create a pool, I'm automatically a market maker. And when people add to that pool, they are also market makers. So it's an interesting sort of way of game theoretically solving for those kind of problems. So that's why I feel that centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges solve very unique problems as of today. And I think both of them are going to continue to work in tandem for the foreseeable future. I think maybe, I don't know, maybe sometime in the future, on-chain transactions will have that level of performance where they can match centralized exchange and possibly that level of breadth of options of tokens across so many different blockchains. But I really feel that that's like quite far away, I would say, like many years in the future. So yeah.
Thank you for that. And it's interesting. We've seen what happened earlier, like going back to traditional finance, and this is more of a question for you all. We saw what happened with Robinhood earlier. I think it was this year or previous year, where the trading was halted, right? Like it's something that's unheard of, like in our neck of the woods, where you halt trading, like you can't do that in a decentralized manner. Like, do we ever expect that DeFi will replace the traditional finance as the backbone of operations, like really like execution style? And this is more of a question for you all. Do we expect that? Maybe Mark or Anton or Arjun?
I really believe that the idea of DeFi is to become a middleware of finance. So the idea is that like also in terms of synergy between CeFi and DeFi or traditional finance, it makes more sense to have something that is resilient and decentralized, that acts as the foundation of the liquidity and the exchange. And on top of that, you can have like more centralized application that will be more user-facing or more application-specific. And I see that in the future, we are in this configuration, if DeFi is successful, obviously, that the center of gravity happens in a decentralized way. And then you have a wide range of application and users that are somewhere inside the spectrum between CeFi and DeFi.
Odin, with this though, I've got a question to ask all of you, because the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, published a study recently where they said 2.8 million people in the UK own or have owned cryptocurrencies. And they've also said 17% of the population, around 11.4 million people, have ownership of financial instruments. So would it be correct, or in a crude estimation, to say that at least in the UK, the DeFi target marketplace is about 11.4 million people, these people that have financial instruments? If that is the case, then 2.8 million people having crypto, does it mean then that being 24% we've crossed the chasm? I doubt we have, because having crypto doesn't mean you taking part in DeFi. I can have my Bitcoin or Ethereum stored in a centralized exchange. It doesn't have anything to do with being DeFi. So what is your take on this, guys?
So I think you've already touched upon like the most important part of the of this question, is that just because somebody holds crypto doesn't necessarily mean that they're very active participants of let's say of the blockchain sort of revolution, as one might say. And it's interesting how centralized exchanges also offer things like margin trading, so certain level of, let's say, different finance options which also exist in centralized finance. However, I think a big part of getting individuals who, let's say, so there are two parts here. One is individuals who hold crypto and who possibly want to experience DeFi, and versus people who let's say don't have much of an idea. I think in both cases, it's an education problem. I think it's so important to demystify DeFi concepts and sort of draw those parallels between how things happen in the centralized world and the decentralized world. If you look at the financial instruments, they're basically, I would say, to a large extent, the same. There's lending and borrowing. There's, of course, staking. There's things like deposits where you can get interest. So there's several parallels. And of course, Web3 has very interesting, sort of financial, or rather vehicles, which are very unique to Web3. Like, for example, when you take concepts like flash loans or governance, but otherwise, the majority of finance is kind of similar and has parallels in Web2 or in centralized exchange or in centralized finance. So I think this is a huge education problem. I think the onus is on all of us who are in this call today, and the kind of organizations we come from and the organizations we lead, that we take an active part in having these kind of discussions like the one we're having right now, and engaging more with people and with centralized agencies, and really sort of spread that knowledge of what is DeFi and how it's not complicated, and solve those problems of onboarding users, making it easier, having more material out there, which is when we will get more participation. I think that is when you can start crossing the chasm. So the first step always is to have lots of information out there to demystify what is decentralized finance.
Is how important is it to capture the users directly to a non-custodial ownership instead of centralized ownership? And I know 1inch, for example, is highly focused on the front end and the execution side of users, while AAVE in particular enables like protocols like to build on top of them. Polygon exceptionally as well. Pillar ourselves, we're trying to make it more approachable. So security-wise, recently there was like a 3.6 billion heist of a South African centralized exchange, which is a little more than 1% of the country's GDP. Do we need to educate them more on like security reasons, and also like do we actually offer more security as DeFi, as the protocol itself in general in the space than a custodial solution?
Someone facing the user every day, I can say that it's like some kind of one dream to think that every single one and my moms and pops will use this kind of device. Like, just never gonna happen. Like, I love open source. I'm fighting for it. I am currently using Linux to have this conversation with you guys. But let's face it, even if all the information is there, most people, they want the comfiness of something that is unowned for them. And that's just part of life. And what is important to me is that in DeFi, maybe for the first time in financial history, you have the choice as a user to either go to a third party and maybe pay some middleman fees or this kind of thing, but you're still in the environment that is designed to be efficient, or you can go directly to the protocols and you can build your own adventure yourself. That is not something that you can find in traditional finance. And I think in the future, 90% of the people will go to centralized or custodian third parties because it's easier, because it's simpler, because it's more accessible. But you have the choice, and it's all about freedom.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the most important here is to educate these people about their risks, that since they don't have these assets, their crypto assets on their own wallet with their own private key, they're vulnerable to this kind of rug pull from a custodian. And it's worth at least to educate people about these risks. And it's their decision to take these risks on their own hands or to keep it in custodian hands, because it's also important, because keeping your private keys is also important, because people may just lose these keys, may lose their recovery phrase, and they will lose their money. And they have to understand what is better for them in each concrete situation. It also possible that some of them would decide to hold part of their holdings of their crypto assets in custodians, part of on self-custodians, and like in their own private keys. So the most important thing for me is to educate people, to let them know about their risks.
And how does this fit in with the risk that DeFi carries along with it? Because we've seen a lot of exploits as well from smart contracts or projects rug pulling on their users. And for those who don't understand the terminology, rug pulls are when projects basically cash out and walk away with the user's money. How do we prevent something like this, or how do we explain this to the user without scaring them off? Does it even make sense to have audits from contracts when they are meaningless and still get hacked? Do we need to focus more on insurance, for example, or like where does this space going to go is my question really.
So this is very interesting, right? When this kind of conversation comes up about the risks of DeFi and the rug pulls have happened, but like rug pulls, or what we call them in centralized world, Ponzi schemes, right, where people just take money and disappear, happen all the time. In fact, like we've seen certain cases, there have been huge rug pulls or Ponzi schemes which have gone bust, and people have just taken the money and gone. and spent it all, as we saw with in the Maddox case and few other cases. So I think the risks are similar in centralized finance and in decentralized finance, and the trick always is for the user to sort of make sure that if they're being promised something which is not, let's say, like a project which is not audited or possibly not run by a known team, or possibly a team which has let's say a good reputation, then there is a certain level of risk there. Just like how when you invest in centralized, in the centralized world, if you're investing in investment schemes which are like maybe too good to be true or offer fantastical returns, or are run by shady people, like you most probably will not invest. And then we see this all the time in our lives. It's basically the same. It's the same basic checks which one can do. And even in those cases, sometimes even with all the best checks and all the audits, even then bad things happen, right? Which like we've seen, frankly, even in the 2008 financial crisis, where certain bonds which were basically junk were given AAA ratings by the government, right? And you had to ask the question, how did this happen? But even in the best cases, sometimes things can go wrong. And I'm not by no means saying that this is okay, or trying to say that of course a lot of people have lost a lot of money and it's obviously a bad thing for the ecosystem and all of us. But again, like the basic checks which a user might use in the centralized world, you literally have to do the same things. You have to be like a little more suspicious. You have to, because it's money at play, and you have to ask those questions, and you have to go and ask like the project leaders those kind of questions in their communities, that have you done the audits, have you checked for hacks, who are you guys, what are the projects you've done before? And then even if you do those kind of things, you can more often than not arrive at great solutions, which can really which bring in interesting capital efficiencies. So it's sort of a similar process as one might see in the centralized exchange world.
Michael, you wanted to say something?
If I add on this one, I look at it from, I agree with what you guys have said, and I look at it from two other directions as well. One of them is from the technical aspect, when you talk about private keys, etc. Being able to have smart wallets and having the ability to recovery options that are outside of your private keys and mnemonic phrases, that is key, and that is essential, and smart wallets allow you to do that. And on top of that, things like being able to add spending limits. You could have a wallet where you store things, and a wallet you use like your checking account. So to speak, when you use a contactless card, you've got a maximum limit of £40. So if you can, enabling that kind of thing, and smart wallets allow us to do that. Those kind of features from the technical side make it usable. And mind you, when I say this, a recent survey we've done in Pillar showed that 90% of the users said security is the most important thing for them when they use a wallet. All other nice features we listed, they were relegated down in comparison to security. So also in the marketplace as well, there are offerings like Nexus Mutual, where you can insure assets, etc. Those kind of products have to be innovated more and be available, because in the traditional finance sense, if I have, say, £1 million in the bank, and there is a run in the bank and the bank goes out of business, I only get £75,000, because that's what the FCA guarantees me. But at least having that sort of insurance would, I think, move it forward.
That's a good point. I think insurance is like, when I do due diligence on a project, I think insurance is one of the key things that I would like to check out, and also execute my own deposits and make sure they're secure, because I've seen too many projects that have done security audits. And if you guys know, you probably know the website Wrecked. They have a nice leaderboard of all the particular security auditors that have been either hacked or exposed as like pretty faulty. So it's difficult to comprehend. But to come back to the subject at hand, like how do we drive mass adoption of users, particularly to DeFi, and do we need to encourage this involvement of like centralized exchanges, or can we onboard them directly? And I want to know from Anton, like what is 1inch do, for example, to drive adoption of users to this space? Because I know you're in particular like on the front end side, and you dominate the market in DEX segregation as well.
Yeah, what we're actually like fighting for, like for the latest month at least, we're trying to educate people that using aggregators is no-brainer for them, because sometimes it's not clear why aggregators requires you to spend more gas. But actually this happens only in case of benefit. If aggregated trade would give you some significant improvement, it could also offer you to spend more gas on this. Else it makes no sense. It makes sense to spend like 20 more bucks on gas in case of super huge transaction. Only in case of this transaction, this aggregation, this path would give you maybe 30 or 40 bucks more result. And we're trying to educate people because we see that actually aggregators, they are capturing the market, but this happens slowly than we expected. We see that a lot of people, they are just still using some concrete dexes like Uniswap or on the like other dexes on other chains, and we were like pretty sure that this shift to aggregators would happen much faster, but this is not happening as fast as we wish.
That's a good question. Answer. To follow up on that, you have recently, just recently expanded into Polygon and Binance Smart Chain as well. And this is more of a general question for everyone. Does the multi-chain experience encourage or discourage users from the DeFi space? Does it make things too complex when we are adding too many, chains, L1s, etc., or roll-ups, etc.? Does it make it? Does it discourage people too much when they're? I know from experience, like, wow, I need to do so many things just to onboard on a different chain. We try to make it easy with Pillar, but I'm trying to understand from you if it's discouraging to see people using too many chains. What do you guys think of it?
I think what is extremely critical, and sorry to be slightly technical on it, but bear with me, is that we absolutely need to generalize the usage of meta transaction, no matter where you are, no matter where the chain is, because you cannot expect a user that comes from Binance, for example, and only use BSC, that will use AAVE for the first time of his life and never heard of the Matic asset, to have some Matic inside his wallet on the Polygon blockchain that he never used before. And that's why we absolutely need to allow the usage of the protocols with whatever token the user has. And that's something that is actively being developed on by several protocols. AAVE is working on it, but we are not the only ones out there, because this is the small user experience things that will make the whole process a whole lot seamless. Because at the end of the day, I think that 6 months from now, or maybe 1 year from now, if we are very conservative, people will jump around from multiple networks, multiple layers, multiple chains, like several times a day, because they want to interact with X and Y protocols that are situated on different layers. And they just don't even know that they are on different protocols, because at the end of the day, that's the user experience that makes sense. Anything more complex than that, it's not good enough.
No, that's an excellent point by Mark, and I 100% agree with that. I think the real way to make blockchain technology super scalable, super effective, and at the same time onboard millions of users who never used blockchain before, is to obfuscate that completely, and essentially use things like meta transactions to make it seamless for the user. I mean, it's just like how people use, for example, how people use WhatsApp. Like, how many times have you asked yourself, what database does WhatsApp use? Right? Nobody cares. It solves the problem, and that's how technology needs to be. That's how you get huge adoption. To the point of being multi-chain, whether it's confusing for the users, there are two ways of looking at it. One way is that this is also, and like if you look at what 1inch has also done, is that they've sort of given two very large communities access to a very successful product. I think both the communities would be very excited to use 1inch, and I'm sure the usage will spike up on both the chains. So from an accessibility standpoint, a lot more users today can access 1inch than they could, let's say, before the solution went live. Another way of looking at it is that if you have the same solution across multiple chains, then the users can get a unified experience even when they switch chains. Like it's something like how you can go to McDonald's in different countries and still sort of get a similar tasting chicken nugget. Like, it's pretty amazing how they do that. But that's basically the concept, that you can go anywhere, you can go to any McDonald's and get the same taste. And similarly, you can go on different chains and use the same protocol and reap the benefits. So I think from both perspectives, it just makes sense. And yeah, I mean, for all of us to make blockchain truly successful, even with what Pillar is doing with this wallet, you got to make it super easy, and you need to obfuscate the complicated details so that more and more users can come feel confident about the technology and realize that it's really easy to use. It's not that complex at all.
Arjun, here's a question for you. With Ethereum 2.0 all promising scaling in the near future, will there be any need for the multi-chain experience with Polygon, etc., for the end users at all? Do you expect us to all just come together under Ethereum 2.0 in the end?
No, I mean, it would be great if there would be one solution out there which would solve everybody's problems. So that would make like life easy for so many people. But what we feel, even with, like, for example, if you look at what is the highest spec which ETH 2.0 talks about, which is like, say, 100,000 transactions per second. If you look at getting, let's say, tens of millions, or if not hundreds of millions of users using blockchain technology, just like there are millions of users who use iOS or millions of users who use Android phones. Like, if you're going to get that much traction on blockchain, and each person is doing, let's say, hundreds of thousands of transactions, and like I've said this before, that the easiest way to figure out or think about how many transactions is possible in a day, just think about the number of times you tap your phone, the number of times you pick up and tap your phone. Like, literally, like, there's so many transactions happening there. So if all of those transactions have to, I mean, this is the blockchain future which all of us want, millions of users using blockchain technology. For this future, what I feel, it's not possible for any one solution or even ETH 2.0 to cater to that level of volume. I feel that there will always be like a sort of, you could say, a scalability layer, or a layer 2 layer, or some sort of layer on top of the base Ethereum chain, which sort of provides that scalability to bring in that level of transaction volume. Because I don't believe that every transaction needs to happen on layer 1. Like, so many transactions, like micro transactions, small value transactions, or gaming and NFTs, etc. All of this can happen very effectively on any sort of scalability solution. So that's how I think about it. And even Vitalik has alluded to this, like roadmap. So whenever he does talk about ETH 2.0 and sharding, he also always talks about rollups and some form of scalability on top of Ethereum to provide that sort of, you could say, scaling, as one might say, right, to millions of users. And that's what we feel. And that's why at Polygon, we are also researching all of these technologies. So we also developing optimistic rollups, ZK rollups. There could be some new scalability solution, maybe 6-9 months down the line or next year. And we've researched that too. So that's why we feel that a scaling layer is essential. It's like how you have which sort of optimize the experience for the user, under heavy load and things like that. So it's something similar. It's like something similar to that. You will always need a scalability layer.
Is that what is the goal of? You recently launched in layer 2 SDK for scaling. Is what's the end goal of that, Arjun?
So again, as an infrastructure provider, when we think about what we want to do under Polygon, and is that we want to put all the options which a developer might need on the table, so that a developer can decide, sort of which tools or which chains he or she needs to build the solution of their dreams. Because ultimately, it's a developer who understands the use case, who understands the business case, who understands the user the best. So we don't want to be the kind of people who go and tell users, this is the solution you should use. Like you should use only this particular rollup or this kind of scaling, and this is the best. And if you're not using this, you don't know what you're doing. Like, we don't want to do that. We want to put all the options on the table, and then developer decides what he or she wants, right? And we want to create this entire environment governed by just one token. So it makes it easy for developers. So you're not doing complicated cross-chain stuff. So having optimistic rollups, ZK rollups, our current chain, Polygon SDK, which is the ability to sort of spawn your own chain, and something which a lot of us private people who use private chains and a lot of organizations, large corporate organizations, want to use. Then we've also talked recently, just in fact a couple of days back, about our data availability layer, where we're looking at further technical ways of building more scalable rollups. So what we want to do is offer all the solutions under one umbrella, and make it easy for developers so that there is one place where you can come and find everything you need, all the tooling, all the bridges, etc. And then that just, it makes it easy for the developer. And then the developer can then build those wonderful experiences, which will then get the users. So this is kind of how we've thought about what we want to do at Polygon, and thereby hence the name Polygon, which is mathematically a figure which can fit any shape or size, which is why we've kept the name that way. So that's what we really aim to be, like, to have that level of flexibility.
Great answer. You mentioned governance. Sorry, go ahead, Anton.
Yeah, excuse me. Let me add a little bit, like my own opinion about sharding, because it's a really interesting topic for me. Initially, when everyone heard about sharding, it sounds like a really good idea, because it's like the only way how it could work to achieve mainstream, to allow billions of people, billions of scripts, of bots, of anyone to use the system. And I also had a few lectures about like sharded smart contracts, on how it's possible to easily build for sharded environment, like to have a sharded smart contract architecture. Because I spent a lot of time thinking on it, but solution is pretty simple. Because if you would just deploy your smart contracts into sharded environment, your smart contracts will not be sharded automatically. They will be non-sharded, but they will be hosted on single shard. This means that transaction capacity of your smart contract or your set of smart contracts, it will be limited to single shard transaction capacity. For example, if you're trying to make token some currency, which is like a global payment currency, stable token to some USD, for example, to make it have like a really sharded behavior and have like almost unlimited transaction capacity, you have to follow special software architecture. You have to build your smart contract in a different way. That's similar to what happened to multi-core CPUs. No one software was automatically scaled, and it all ended that all the developers, they're working on it on their own. You have your programs on your computer which run on different cores, but if your single program need multiple cores, developers of this program have to adopt it, have to change the source code, and there is no like automatic solution for this. And this is what would happen to smart contracts. No one would shard your smart contract logic. You have to take care of it on your own, like developers of smart contracts should take care of it. And I came to some ideas and some like solution to make these sharded architectures. It works for some cases, but not sure. But sure, it's not possible to work on all the smart contracts. It will work for tokens, for limit orders, but it will not work for Uniswap like AMMs, because they behave as a single account. Its behavior could not be sharded. So the more and more we're like coming closer to sharding, I'm as a developer who work inside the system, who is working mostly on smart contracts, I'm thinking that sharding is not a good idea. It will not work really great for all the DeFi ecosystem. But as a developer who builds systems, like if I'm looking at blockchain from external, I think that sharding is the way. We can't have like terabytes of RAM on each node. We need sharding. We need to distribute this execution among different subsets, shards. But yeah,
wow,
from smart contract point of view, it seems it's really different.
I would love to read more about this. I don't know if you published anything, Anton. This is fascinating stuff. I want to, because we only have 9 minutes left, I want to bring the conversation back with a couple of questions from the audience. But one main thing I wanted to address today is governance and how important and effective governance is in our ecosystem. Like, Do a lot of token holders really participate in your ecosystem? I want to hear from each and every one of you, or are they just, are we just as projects giving it a utility, to basically to circumvent securities laws? Is that what we're doing right now? Like, how much of a participation do you have in your ecosystem? And also, the second part of that question is, what's the relationship in your own DAOs and your governance system between, normal participation or whales or big stakeholders like VCs, for example? So maybe Anton, since you answered that, maybe you can elaborate on that, and then we can go around to everyone.
Yeah, we have in One Inch Network, we have just released a new governance approach, and we have an update which was like released like 1 hour ago. Yeah, so what we have on chain right now, like deployed, and initially what was created, we have a little bit a different approach to governance because it looks like more like weighted voting. The weight of your vote is proportional to your balance, and you can vote on like fixed number of proposals. You can't like create new proposals, but this is like subject for upcoming upgrades to make this automatic and make it like work as other DAOs. We're not like rushing on this because we believe that all the governance in blockchains right now, this is experiments, and a lot of, they are all different. Some of them are similar because they borrow from each other. This is very normal. And they have different problems, and they are trying to solve these problems differently, issues. And some of them like succeed in some solutions, some of them not. And we're looking at this at like super huge experiment. And right now, no one knows how it should work, but we will all know how it should work in like after 20 years, for example. But right now it's field of experiments, and we're stepping into it really slowly and looking how it works for others. And I believe everyone who is actively working on governance systems, they are looking at each other and trying to understand, is something is a good idea or not idea. So yeah, that's my answer.
Great. Mark, what about yourself? How do you see governance going forward? Is it giving us utility or not really at this point?
Well, to me, it's I'm gonna be like sharp and clear about it. I'm interested in building decentralized protocol. So if the whole idea of having a decentralized governance, it's not actually implemented, and you don't have like actual power to the token holders, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, I can do many other things in my life, and I'm not spending like so many hours per day, every day into the ecosystem to build like not decentralized stuff. So yeah, it's really important to me that you have actual decentralized autonomous organization that are in control of the protocols in our ecosystem. In terms of vote, you don't see that much individuals or entities. Obviously, it's very hard to pinpoint who is behind the active address or behind every governance vote, because everything is decentralized and permissionless. So unless people tell you this address is me or the entity says so, it's very hard to pinpoint. And we have like around the different shape and form of the AAVE asset, which is the governance asset of the AAVE governance. We have around 100K address owning this address. So that's quite big. Like it's bigger than a few countries up there. And in terms of participation, what we have and the interfaces of the AAVE governance is around the role of delegation. So representative within the community. So anyone with some AAVE assets or stake AAVE assets or whatever form of AAVE that is compatible to vote can delegate their proposal or voting power to a third party address. And it's actually quite active. Like we have big location or language based community, like for example the French community where I'm very involved. We have like Didi Moon, which is like a big actor that is absolutely not known in the English speaking communities, but believe me, in France he is a star. We have like delegators from the ecosystem, all these kind of guys, and those guys are active. And also we have a silent reserve of voters that will act up and actually vote and be involved in the governance vote when there's something that is either controversial or very important for them. And we have two examples of that. We got an upgrade on the safety module contract, which is the staking contract on AAVE that happened, and we got a significant amount of vote that happened compared to any other regular vote. And we got a vote recently on the onboarding of the RAI asset that was slightly controversial within the community, and we got also with that particular vote more participation. And also there's, and that's not only AAVE, but that's more general in the community. You have a lot of people that don't actually vote on-chain, but are very active inside the governance call, the governance forum, on the social media, especially Twitter. You will learn and meet a lot of loud voice in this kind of networks, and that's pretty normal. That's how democracy works, or at least governance work. And yeah, I think there's a lot of implication, and maybe DeFi, and I will end on this note, is that maybe DeFi is one of the first time in financial history, or even in this kind of things, or anybody in the world can go from absolutely no one, like someone with like no followers, not being famous, not having money, if he gets involved in the governance forum, like in the scope of a few months, can become like the center of gravity of a community, be someone very involved and very respected. Like there's a lot of example of that in many communities, like in MakerDAO, Money Supply, that was not famous in the ecosystem before, and now is one of the leader of many governance system, and a big representative there, like Channing Good in the Channing community. And I think we all have names that we can quote in that sense. And I think it's pretty cool that you can get involved and just be recognized if you have like something valuable to add to a community, no matter who you are and where you are or how rich you are.
Well said. Well, guys, we are really running out of time, so thank you so much for joining us. I have one particular question that's coming straight from our team for Arjun, and that's can we stop the floods that we have, or the spamming on the Polygon network somehow? Is there a mechanism for that?
So as public infrastructure, there is literally no way you can ever stop something like this, because you cannot censor people from the network, and that's not an approach we ever want to take. So for us, our response to this is going to be that, so number one, we've strengthened all the infrastructure, sort of, let's say, the RPC providers. We've had conversations with all of them, and we're trying to strengthen our infrastructure. We're also bringing on new sort of public infrastructure providers. So for example, we already have Infura, but Alchemy will also be live soon, and we're in talks with other providers as well to give us that extra sort of, let's say, strength in the network. So this is one thing which we're doing right now, and we're looking at solutions like Blockstrat, Blocknative, etc., to improve the stability of the network and also of the nodes, so that even if somebody spams the network, like, it would not matter. If I were to look at the future, this has been a very just take 30 seconds. This has been very interesting for us also, because the love of the community has been so great that the number of transactions on our network is scaling at such a rapid pace that it's something, I must admit, we also did not to an extent expect. So that means all the plans which we had for network upgrades in, like, let's say Q3 or Q4 of this year have all been pulled back. So everybody is now working super hard to execute all the upgrades which we had so meticulously planned, as a roadmap. Everything has to be like done now because our network has scaled so well. But of course, this is because the community has confidence in us. So there are a lot of exciting upgrades which we have planned. We will be covering those in our community calls about, how we're going to mitigate this problem. But as public infrastructure, like, we will not, in fact, censor anyone, etc. So it's fair game for anybody to, to spam our network. And if you want to run infrastructure which is fast and cheap, then, this is something which is going to happen. But we just need to be stronger and build a better network, and which is what we're doing.
Thank you for that. All right, guys, this concludes our panel discussion. I wish we had some more time, to be honest, because there's a lot of other subject matter that we can, but hopefully we'll be able to do this again with all of you. So thank you so much for joining. So let's close up, and I apologize for all the people that I could not present their questions towards the team. I believe we have a poll that's ready to be used right now. So people can vote on what we should be discussing in our upcoming webinars. This is a series of webinars. And also there is, you can now actually answer them. So which topic should we discuss on the next one? Information creation, scaling, investment strategies, and which part of the webinar did you find most interesting? And if you'd like to learn more from us. One last item I wanted to tell you guys is next week we have NFTs in the Chasm. So we have Drew Harding from Meta Factory, James Young from Collabland, and Bancor Nat Hindman joining us, same time, same place. So please join us as well. One final item I wanted to tell you guys is if you join our Discord channel, there's a limited edition NFT with the code name multichain. So please join it. So you'll be in the raffle if you can get it or not. So I really want to thank all of our speakers today and all our panelists, Anton, Mark, Arjun, you guys have been amazing. And thank you also, Michael, for joining us. And yeah, have a great day, guys. And download Pillar V2.